Hello, I'm Richard Vobes, the Bald Explorer, and I'm back again with my lovely son, Stanley. Hello, Stanley.
Hello, Father.
How are you?
And viewers. I'm tired.
Are you?
Yes.
Now, why are you tired?
Because we have a second child.
This is very exciting. It means I am a grandfather again. And
Duo grandfather times 2. Dos.
So for those of you who are watching this for the very first time, I'm Richard Vobes and this is my son Stanley, and you are what, 30 now?
Yes.
You are my son, clearly, and because we both share the same beard and amount of hair. Now, you've got a child. I've got a grandson who is what, nearly 2.5?
2.5, yep. 2.5, George.
Good old George. And you've just had a second son who is what, 3 weeks?
Yeah, 3 weeks today.
3 weeks today, as
Yeah.
we record on the 1st of November. So I thought, and I've just come down here to meet him for the very first time, and what a lovely, charming little chap he is. I'll put a picture on the screen so you can see him. He's a beautiful little baby with
Starlight.
Let's not start the star wipes. But he is a very hairy little chap. I can tell he's yours and not mine.
Yes. Yeah, both our children have came out with good amount of hair. Good
Hirsute
weighty hair.
children. Yeah.
Yes.
Exactly. So I thought I would ask you, take this opportunity, you know what I'm like, bring the camera with me wherever I go. And
Yeah, ask for 10 minutes every time you visit.
10 minutes. What's it like being a father in this new era? And in particularly, now that we've just had the announcement from the Prime Minister that we're going into a second lockdown, having lived through a lockdown with your 2-year-old, I'm lucky enough when we had you and your other brother and your sister that we never had anything like that, we had different challenges. So, but before we get on to the lockdown and living through that, you must be very proud having another child.
Yeah, we the thing about having 2 is it feels more like a family instead of 2 adults just taking care of another human. It's more of a coherent whole than just an accident. Not that George was an accident, but it sort of proves that we want a family and not just a single child for the sake of it. And seeing George interact with the newborn Theo is amazing. It's I'm really looking forward to them being older so they can sort of play together, and when we're sick of them we can kick them out in the garden and they can entertain each other.
And they're a nice age, aren't they, to be, because some people have a much older, there's a bigger gap rather between the two, whereas there is 2.5 years.
Yeah, we wanted to try and keep them close together, and Patricia at some point wants to go back to work, so obviously the quicker we get the kids out, the quicker she can do that. So yeah, I think it's a good age, and I'm very happy that we didn't wait too long. I mean, my sister Georgie and I, we are 3 years roughly apart, maybe 2.5-ish or 3.5-ish. I don't know exactly. Yeah, and we got on, and even now the age difference doesn't really make a difference.
Because when you went with Billy, my youngest son, there's 5 years between you and Billy.
Yeah.
And that was quite tricky at points because you'd be 10 years old and he was 5 and he was desperate to be your age.
Yeah, and I remember being just trying to get rid of him sometimes.
Because he must have seemed so immature.
Yeah, or just I don't know. I guess when every age you're finding who you are, but in a different way. So when you're under 5, you're just figuring out that you exist as an independent person.
Yeah.
And then when you're 10, creeping up on the teens, you're really trying to figure out what your interests are and what make you unique. And then you've just got this 5-year-old following you around and sort of cramping your style. Not that I was cool at all.
No, but yeah. I know what you mean.
You're like thinking on different wavelengths, I guess.
With your younger son Theodore, you deliberately didn't know what sex he was going to be until he was born.
Yeah, so
that's quite unusual, isn't it?
Well, so with George, we knew straight away, and we named him sort of as soon as we knew the gender. And the thought process being that we don't know if we're going to have any more. We may do, we may not. But I wanted to, and I pushed to not know the gender because I wanted to do it differently, just have a different experience, try to change as much of it as possible so that we could experience what we didn't experience the first time. So that's why we didn't.
And was that difficult as time went on? That, at first you could say, well, we don't know what it is, but as you were becoming closer to the delivery, that other people who might have wanted to buy you stuff were sort of flummoxed because what do we get you, boy or girl?
Yeah, well,
stuff.
I think it's an interesting. There were points where it would have been useful to know the gender, but I think in this day and age as well, it's the gender. Buy them stuff when they're 0 years old. I don't care whether they're wearing blue or pink.
No, exactly.
The gender doesn't matter. Like, we would love him whatever gender he was, and I think just give us your presents.
Yeah,
that was
And of course, you've got a lot of hand-me-down stuff anyway, which is fairly gender neutral when they're a baby of 0 to a year.
Yeah, if it was a girl, she'd still be wearing all of George's clothes. Basically, We'd buy some new ones, but I remember everything we got for George was essentially second hand because we had a lot to get. Whereas this time we can get some new things, and they would have. If it was a girl, we would have had some nice things, but they just kids spit up on them and they just get ruined anyway.
So did you have any hopes as you approached to the birth of what you would like?
We were flipping between them. So I, for most of it, wanted the boy, and then at the end we all thought it was going to be a girl, or were hoping for a girl. Again, having something different. But I like the idea of a boy because they can play fight and stuff. Although a girl could as well. In all honesty, like me and Georgie still did that sort of thing. But it would have been nice to have had a girl, just again for something different.
So let's talk about COVID, because that's been obviously 2020's experience.
And you can't do a video without bringing it up now.
These days, it's everything. But it's particularly in respect that we've now got these new restrictions. We're going into lockdown 2 in about 5 days' time, or 4 days' time. What was it like with a 2-year-old who was just beginning to become social within his peer group?
Yeah, so before COVID, George was doing a couple of mornings or afternoons at a nursery and really enjoying it and really settling in. And when COVID happened, at that same time, just before we found out we were pregnant, and so we were essentially on the not the shielding. Well, we had to shield. We had to be take it very seriously because if a child developing in the belly, you don't really want to get COVID and upset that. So we went full lockdown for basically the last 6 months. We've been pretty locked down. George took it really well, which was good. And now he's just really eager, I think, to get back into it. He's sort of getting bored of being at home, being on the iPad. Obviously, we've had a nice summer, so we've had time in the garden and been able to play a lot. But now he's just stuck indoors. So we're putting him back into nursery.
And fortunately, as we understand it, this lockdown hasn't enforced children to be completely at home.
Yeah, all the education, so universities, schools, nurseries, all of that is still going to be going, rightly or wrongly.
But I suppose when you went through the first lockdown, as you say, George took it very well. As at 2 years old, his experience wasn't sufficient that he had anything really to compare it with, and just assumed that was how things were.
It wasn't a dramatic change for him because he'd only been in nursery for up to 6 months beforehand, and even then only 2 days a week, or a morning or an afternoon. So it's 10% of his time was taken away, as opposed to if you're at work or if you're at university or school, that's your week changing.
How did you organise your life though, in terms of earning money and working, when you could no longer take a child to a child group?
Yeah, so again, when George was in nursery, Patricia had just started to get some jobs, coming off of her maternity basically with George, but they were ending up being in the NHS and in COVID specific clinics, so without having to shield, she had to drop that, which meant she could look after George, and I, having just got an office for my business in January, of which there's a video, I then had to retreat back to the home office. So it was all a bit chaotic. And as Patricia got more pregnant and could do less with George, it all started getting on top of us. But now the baby's here and we can put George back in.
Yes, and as we said, thankfully children are able to do that, and I can't imagine that the government, even if we had to do a further lockdown, would put people through having the children at home, because it's just been so chaotic, really.
It has shown that the primary use case for school is as a daycare centre, even for 15-year-olds, just allowing the parents to go off from work. And considering that our government is all about just trying to stimulate the economy and not really saving lives, that's what they want people to be able to do, is go out there and earn and spend, as opposed to staying at home looking after useless children.
Yes, but also I think, imagine the mums and the dads who have had to cope with children who are not used to being at home, because there's normally that form of routine in their lives that had been taken away, and thank goodness. And I imagine there's been a huge sigh from a lot of parents to think, thank God I can, even though we have to stay at home, we can stay in separate rooms, but we don't for 8 hours or 6 hours have to have the children turning up to us every 10 minutes saying, I'm bored.
Well, especially if you imagine you're in London and you're in a flat and there's just not space.
Yeah.
And the kid, George alone in our house, even with us doing the garden this year, he can get a little bit stir crazy, cabin fever, and I have to just get in the car and go out for a walk with him, which we try to do as often as we can. But if you're stuck in a hot summer in a flat in London with maybe multiple kids, it must be very difficult. And then you're working from home. I remember when the lockdown started and people were sharing online their makeshift home offices, and some of them were just in the hallway in front of the front door on your washing basket, because that's all people have, because they're not everyone has a spare room or even a desk and the space to work. And then you've got kids in the background.
Absolute nightmare.
So many calls I've been on now at work where there's kids in the background, either on audio or just sitting on the person's lap, because that's the only way you can.
And I suppose in the early days, before COVID, anything like that would have been seen to be incredibly unprofessional, and kids are not there to be seen. But now with lockdown, kids at home, it's a lot more acceptable, as you say, to have to host a call on a business professional call, and there's a baby on your lap.
Yeah, it's
may not be ideal, but
it's a common sight, and if it doesn't happen all the time, or most of the time. People try to, and spouses and kids try to respect that people are working, but it's not an uncommon occurrence, and it's not enough that people look down on it or are annoyed by it anymore.
No,
you just mute yourself.
So in a way, that's quite nice that the family unit is just creeping on the edges of business. That it's not like they're completely taken away. That we remember that business is about earning money for people who have families.
Yeah, and a lot of the time your work team is almost an extended family.
And just at that moment, Patricia, your fiancée, has brought in. Do you want to go and just get him and just show him to the
world?
Show him to the world, and then we will end. Here he comes. This is Theo. Hello, Theo. Now, if I could ask you 20 questions, Theo, what was the birth like? Did you enjoy it? What's it like coming into the world with this crazy dad? And what do you think of your granddad? He's going to take some time to think about that, I think.
Give him a couple of years.
Yeah. Oh, it's so lovely to see him, and it's so nice for me to meet my second grandson. So there we go. Well, thank you for sharing your account of being a second father. I can see you clearly.
There you go, showing the world. We didn't have this with George, did we?
No.
So, hello.
But there we are. So how wonderful, and no doubt we'll be back to find out how it all goes. So there we are. Don't forget to follow, like and subscribe, become a patron, support what I do, and I'll make some more videos. But from little Theo here, somewhere near Southampton, with Stanley, my son, and my lovely second grandson, goodbye.
Bye for now.